There are places in psychiatric hospitals where the walls remember things they shouldn't, where observation windows work both ways, and where the staff who watch the patients discover, too late, that something has been watching them all along. If you've ever worked night shift in a place that felt wrong, drop a comment. Tell me where you were and what you heard. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and for 3 years I worked in the observation wing of Northbrook Psychiatric Hospital. The observation wing wasn't like the other wards. It occupied the north end of the building, separated from general population by 2 sets of locked doors and a long corridor that seemed to stretch longer than the blueprint suggested. 8 rooms, all identical. Each room had a one-way observation window facing into the corridor. Patients inside couldn't see out, but staff could watch from the hallway without disturbing treatment. Standard design for high-risk psychiatric care. Nothing unusual about it. The rooms were reserved for patients requiring constant monitoring, severe psychotic episodes, extreme dissociation, behavior that posed immediate risk to self or others. During my orientation, Charge Nurse Williams walked me through the protocols. Observation checks every 15 minutes, she said, marking times on the log sheet. Document everything. Behavior, speech, movement patterns. If something changes, you note it. I nodded, familiar with standard observation procedures. But when we reached the end of the corridor, Williams stopped at the final observation window. Room 8. "This one requires special attention," she said quietly. "The patient in room 8 needs hourly documentation, not every 15 minutes. "Why less frequent?" I asked. Williams hesitated. "Because the more you watch, the more active the patient becomes. It's better to limit observation intervals." That seemed backwards. High-risk patients typically needed more monitoring, not less. "What's the diagnosis?" "The chart says acute dissociative disorder with perceptual disturbances," Williams replied. "But between you and me, we're not entirely sure what we're treating." Through the observation window, I could see a woman sitting motionless on the edge of her bed. She appeared to be in her mid-30s, hospital gown, bare feet, hands folded in her lap. Her posture was unnaturally still. "How long has she been admitted?" 6 weeks, same position, same stillness. She doesn't sleep, doesn't pace, doesn't respond to verbal interaction." "What does she respond to?" Williams met my eyes. "Being watched." My first solo night shift began at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday in March. The observation wing was quiet. 7 of the 8 rooms were occupied, each patient displaying the kind of acute symptoms that required isolation from general population. Room 1, Mr. Patterson, mid-50s, experiencing paranoid delusions involving government surveillance. Room 2, empty, recently cleaned after a discharge. Room 3, Ms. Rodriguez, late 20s, catatonic depression with selective mutism. Room 4, Mr. Chen, elderly, advanced dementia with aggressive episodes. Room 5, Ms. Thompson, 40s, bipolar disorder in severe manic phase. Room 6, Mr. Davis, 30s, schizophrenia with command hallucinations. Room 7, Ms. Anderson, 20s, borderline personality disorder following suicide attempt. Room 8, the woman Williams had warned me about. Chart listed her name as Jane Morrison, though the intake paperwork was oddly sparse on personal details. I began my rounds at midnight, following the protocol Williams had outlined. 15-minute intervals for rooms 1 through 7, hourly checks for room 8. The first 6 rooms showed expected patterns, Patterson pacing and muttering about surveillance equipment, Rodriguez motionless in bed, Chen sleeping fitfully, Thompson talking rapidly to herself, Davis responding to internal voices. Anderson curled in fetal position, standard observations. I documented everything with appropriate clinical detail. At 1 a.m., I approached room 8 for my first hourly check. Jane Morrison remained in the same position I'd seen during orientation, sitting on the bed's edge, hands folded, staring straight ahead at the wall opposite the observation window. I watched for the required 30 seconds, noting her unchanged posture and lack of apparent distress. But as I turned to leave, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. Morrison's head had turned, not toward me exactly, but toward the observation window, as if she could sense someone watching despite the one-way glass. I stepped back to the window. Morrison's position had returned to normal, facing the wall, hands folded, completely still. Probably just normal movement during my observation, I told myself. Patients shift positions. Nothing unusual, but something about the timing felt deliberate. The rest of my shift passed without incident until my 4 a.m. rounds. When I reached room 8, Morrison was standing, not pacing or moving around the room, just standing in the exact center of the space, arms at her sides, facing the observation window. Her eyes were open, but unfocused, the kind of blank stare associated with dissociative states or catatonic episodes. I documented the change in position and continued watching. Morrison didn't blink, didn't sway, didn't show any of the subtle movements that indicate normal human breathing and muscle tension. She looked like a statue placed in the center of the room. After 2 minutes of observation, I moved away from the window to check on the other patients. When I returned 5 minutes later, Morrison had moved again. She was now standing closer to the observation window. Not directly in front of it, but several feet nearer than her previous position. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital's aggressive air conditioning. Patients don't move that precisely during dissociative episodes. Movement during altered states is typically disorganized, confused, lacking the deliberate repositioning I was observing. I pulled out my incident report form, intending to document Morrison's unusual behavior pattern. But before I could write anything, I heard a sound from inside room 8. A voice, quiet but clear through the intercom system, that allowed staff to hear patient vocalizations. "I can feel you watching." Morrison's lips hadn't moved. Her position hadn't changed, but the voice had definitely come from her room. "Ms. Morrison?" I spoke into the intercom. "Can you hear me?" No response, just continued stillness, that blank stare directed at the observation window, at the wall where I was standing, at me. I completed the rest of my rounds quickly, checking the other patients with professional efficiency, while my mind kept returning to room 8. When I passed Morrison's window on my way back to the nurse's station, I didn't look inside. The next night, I arrived for my shift to find a note in my mailbox. "Dr. Chen, please review attached documentation regarding room 8 observation protocols. Special attention to patient response patterns during monitoring periods." The attached file contained observation logs from the past 6 weeks, written by various staff members assigned to the observation wing. Every log told the same story. Morrison remained completely still until someone watched her for longer than 60 seconds. Then she would move, turn her head, stand, walk closer to the observation window. The logs included sketches showing her progressive positions during extended observation periods. First minute, sitting on bed. Second minute, standing at bed's edge. Third minute, center of room. Fourth minute, 3 feet from window. Fifth minute, directly in front of window, face pressed against glass. One nurse had written in the margin, "Stopped watching after minute 4. Do not exceed recommended observation intervals." Another note, different handwriting. "Patient knows when she's being observed. Responds with increasing proximity to monitoring staff. Suggest minimal visual contact." The most recent entry was dated 2 days before my first shift. Morrison spoke during observation, said, "I can see you now. Recommend administrative review of observation protocols." That entry was signed by Night Nurse Williams, the same Williams who'd given me my orientation, who'd warned me to limit observation to hourly intervals, who should have told me that Morrison could somehow detect when she was being watched through one-way glass and would move progressively closer to whoever was observing her. I sat at the nurse's station, reviewing the documentation, while the observation wing settled into its nighttime quiet. 8 rooms, 7 occupied, one that required less watching than all the others, because the patient in room 8 didn't need to be observed. She needed to be left alone. But hospital protocol demanded documentation. State regulations required monitoring. My medical license obligated me to verify patient safety every hour, even if that meant allowing Morrison to know exactly when I was watching, and to move closer every time I looked. Some patients improve with observation, others deteriorate. But Jane Morrison did something worse. She learned. And every time someone watched her through that window, she measured the distance between herself and the glass. By my 3rd night, I developed a system. Approach room 8's observation window quickly. Count to 30. Document Morrison's position. Move away before the 60-second threshold. The logs had been clear. Extended observation triggered progressive movement. Stay under a minute, and Morrison remained manageable. I told myself this was just careful adherence to documented protocols, professional caution based on empirical evidence. But really, I was afraid of what would happen if I watched too long. The other patients showed expected patterns. Patterson's paranoia was responding to medication adjustments. Rodriguez had begun speaking in single-word responses. Chen's aggressive episodes were decreasing in frequency. Normal psychiatric progression, symptoms improving or stabilizing according to treatment protocols. Room 8 was different. Morrison's chart showed no medication orders beyond basic sedatives, which she refused consistently. No therapy sessions scheduled. No treatment plan beyond maintain observation and document behavioral patterns. It wasn't a treatment approach, it was containment. During my 2 a.m. rounds, I found something that made my carefully maintained system falter. When I approached room 8's window for my hourly check, Morrison was already standing at the glass, not pressed against it like the logs had described happening during extended observation, just standing there, 3 inches from the one-way mirror, positioned exactly where someone checking through the window would see her face first. Waiting. I documented the position and moved away, but the image stayed with me. Her eyes had been open, focused on the exact spot where my face had appeared in the observation window, as if she'd known precisely when I would arrive, as if she'd been counting the minutes between checks. At 3 a.m., I broke protocol. I needed to understand what Morrison was doing, what she was responding to, whether her behavior represented genuine psychiatric pathology or something the observation logs couldn't adequately explain. I approached room 8's window and began counting. 30 seconds. Morrison standing in center of room, facing the window. 60 seconds. No movement. Still standing, but her head tilted slightly, as if listening. 90 seconds. She took 1 step forward. Smooth, deliberate, no hesitation. I should have stopped watching. The logs had been explicit about exceeding observation intervals. But I needed to see the pattern for myself, to understand the mechanism behind Morrison's responses. 2 minutes. Another step. She was now halfway between the room's center and the observation window. Her eyes remained fixed on the exact position where I stood in the corridor. 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Morrison smiled. Not a pleasant expression. Not the kind of smile associated with positive affect or appropriate social response. A smile that acknowledged something, recognized something. Me. She raised one hand slowly and pointed directly at the observation window, directly at my face. Then she mouthed 3 words, clear enough to read through the glass. I see you. I stepped back from the window, heart pounding with adrenaline that felt disproportionate to what I'd observed. A patient had smiled and gestured, common behaviors, even in acute psychiatric settings, nothing objectively threatening about the interaction. But every instinct screamed that I'd made a mistake, that I'd given Morrison something she wanted by watching too long. I returned to the nurse's station and pulled Morrison's intake records, looking for background information that might explain her unusual presentation. The file was remarkably thin for a 6-week admission. Jane Morrison, age 34. No listed address, no emergency contacts, no previous psychiatric history documented in accessible databases. Admission date, January 15th. Admission source, police transfer following a wellness check at an unspecified location. Presenting symptoms. Patient found in observation tower of abandoned psychiatric facility. Appeared to have been present for extended period. Stated purpose, someone has to watch. Initial psychiatric evaluation noted, patient demonstrates unusual fixation on observation and monitoring. Claims to have been keeping watch for unspecified period. No clear psychotic symptoms, but persistent belief that observation is necessary for undefined protective purposes. The notes became sparser after the first week. Week 2. Patient remains fixated on being watched, requests increased observation intervals. Staff advised to limit visual contact per behavioral response patterns. Week 3. Patient has learned observation schedule. Positions herself for maximum visibility during monitoring checks. Recommend protocol modification. Week 4. Patient appears to anticipate observation timing with increasing accuracy. Suggest evaluation of alternative monitoring methods. Week 5. No entries. Week 6. Single notation in different handwriting. Patient knows. That was 3 days ago. No explanation of what Morrison knew. No elaboration on the cryptic documentation. Just 2 words that suggested whoever wrote them had discovered something they couldn't or wouldn't explain in official records. I checked the signature. Williams, RN. The same nurse who'd given me orientation, who'd warned me about observation intervals, who'd documented Morrison's progression with increasing alarm. Williams was scheduled for tonight's shift, covering the observation wing's east corridor, while I monitored the west. I needed to talk to her, to understand what the logs weren't saying clearly, but when I checked the staffing board, Williams's name had been crossed out. A handwritten note explained, medical leave extended, coverage assigned to Chen. Medical leave starting the same day Morrison had spoken during observation. The same shift Williams had documented Morrison saying, "I can see you now." At 4 a.m., I conducted rounds with deliberate efficiency, spending minimal time at each observation window. Room 1, Patterson sleeping. Room 3, Rodriguez in bed, eyes open but unfocused. Room 4, Chen snoring softly. Room 5, Thompson pacing, muttering about projects and deadlines. Room 6, Davis sitting on floor, hands over ears. Room 7, Anderson asleep, curled around her pillow. Room 8, empty. I stopped, recounted the rooms, checked my documentation. 7 patients, 8 rooms. Room 8 should contain Jane Morrison, but the space beyond the observation window showed only an empty room. Bed neatly made, no personal belongings, no indication of occupancy. I checked the patient census, 8 admissions listed. All rooms documented as occupied, but room 8 was vacant. I tried the door handle, standard protocol when a patient appeared to be missing from their assigned room. The handle turned easily, not locked, despite observation wing rooms being secured from outside for patient safety. The room was cold. Not just cool from air conditioning, but genuinely cold, like a space that hadn't contained human warmth for days. I checked the bed, sheets crisp, tucked with hospital corners, no impression of recent use. The bathroom was empty. No toiletries, no evidence of occupancy. I was reaching for my radio to report a missing patient when I heard the voice behind me. "You watched too long." I spun around. Morrison stood in the doorway, blocking my exit. Not threatening, just present, occupying the space between me and the corridor. "Ms. Morrison, you need to return to your bed." She tilted her head, studying me with those unnervingly focused eyes. "You exceeded the observation interval. 2 minutes and 43 seconds. That's long enough." "Long enough for what?" Morrison smiled, the same expression I'd seen through the observation window. "Long enough for me to see you clearly, to understand your schedule, your patterns, the exact moments when you'll be watching." She took a step into the room. I took a step back. "The observation window works both ways now, Dr. Chen. I've been watching you since your first shift, learning your routines, measuring the distances." "That's not possible. The glass is one way. Patients can't see through it." "Patients can't," Morrison agreed. "But I'm not really a patient, am I? Check my admission papers again. Look at the source location." I thought about the intake notes, the abandoned psychiatric facility, the observation tower where Morrison had been found. "You said someone has to watch. What did you mean?" Morrison moved closer. I was now backed against the far wall, the observation window to my left, Morrison between me and the door. "Every hospital needs someone in the observation wing. Someone who understands that watching is a form of care, that monitoring creates connection, that the observer and the observed are bound together through the act of attention." She gestured toward the observation window. Williams understood. "That's why she's gone. She watched too long, just like you did tonight. And now she understands what I understood when they found me in that tower." "What did you understand?" Morrison's smile widened. "That once you've been observed long enough, you can never stop watching. It becomes your purpose, your function, the thing that defines your existence." She pointed at the observation window, at the corridor beyond where the night shift continued its rounds. "Someone has to watch the observation wing, Dr. Chen. Someone has to monitor the patients, document their behaviors, maintain the careful attention that keeps them safe." She moved toward the door, pausing in the doorway. "Williams is in room 2 now, the empty room you documented during rounds, except it's not empty anymore. She's learning what it means to be observed instead of observing." Morrison stepped into the corridor, and I heard the door lock click behind her. "Your shift ends at 7 a.m., she called through the closed door. 3 more hours of observation, 3 more hours of watching." Her footsteps faded down the corridor, toward the nurse's station, toward the observation logs, toward the schedule that showed exactly when I would make my next rounds. I was locked in room 8, the observation room, on the wrong side of the one-way glass, and somewhere in the corridor, Jane Morrison was learning my patterns with the same careful attention I'd been trained to apply to patients. Measuring the distances, counting the intervals, watching. In psychiatric facilities, documentation is everything. Every observation recorded, every interval logged. But what happens when the patient starts keeping the records? When the watched becomes the watcher and the schedule runs backwards? The observation window in room 8 faced inward. I'd walked past it dozens of times without really thinking about the architecture. One-way glass, allowing corridor observation of patient behavior. Standard design. But now, locked inside, I understood something the blueprints didn't show. The window wasn't just for watching patients, it was for displaying them. I checked my phone. 4:17 a.m. No signal, which was normal for the observation wing. The reinforced walls blocked most cellular reception. My radio was still clipped to my belt. I could call security, report the situation, get someone to unlock the door. But Morrison's words kept replaying in my mind. "Williams is in room 2 now. She's learning what it means to be observed instead of observing. I pressed the call button on my radio. Static. Then a voice. Not security. Not the night supervisor. Williams. Observation wing, this is Williams. Go ahead. My hand trembled. Williams was on medical leave. She shouldn't be responding to radio calls. Williams, this is Dr. Chen. I'm locked in room 8. I need security to open the door. Silence for several seconds. Then, room 8 is vacant, Dr. Chen. According to the census log, that room has been empty since last week's discharge. Are you sure about your location? I looked around the small space. Bed, bathroom, observation window. Definitely room 8. I'm certain. The patient, Jane Morrison, locked me inside. More silence. There's no patient named Jane Morrison in our system, Williams said slowly. Dr. Chen, how many consecutive shifts have you worked this week? 3. Tonight is my 3rd night. And how much sleep have you had between shifts? I understood what she was implying. Exhaustion, stress-induced confusion. The kind of perceptual disturbances that affect healthcare workers during extended night duty. Williams, I'm not confused. Morrison is real. She was admitted 6 weeks ago from an abandoned facility. You documented her responses to observation intervals yourself. Dr. Chen, Williams's voice was patient, the tone medical professionals use with patients experiencing delusions. I've been on medical leave for 2 weeks. I haven't documented anyone's observations in that time. 2 weeks. But the log entries I'd read were dated within the past week. Recent documentation, current observations, progressive notes about Morrison's behavior. Unless the dates were wrong. Unless I'd been reading old records and misinterpreting the timeline. Can you verify the current date? I asked. March 24th, Thursday morning, 4:21 a.m. I'd started my shift on March 22nd, Tuesday night, 3 days ago, according to my memory. But Williams said today was Thursday. I was missing a day. I need you to come to the observation wing, I said carefully. Can you do that? I'm not in the hospital, Dr. Chen. I'm at home. I've been on medical leave since She paused. Since I had an incident in the observation wing. What kind of incident? Williams didn't answer immediately. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. I watched too long. Room 8. The patient seemed distressed, so I extended the observation interval. Stayed at the window for nearly 5 minutes trying to assess whether intervention was needed. And what happened? The patient moved closer to the glass, kept getting closer until she was right up against the window, face pressed to the surface. Then she smiled and said something I couldn't quite hear through the intercom. I gripped the radio tighter. What did she say? Your shift is over. Time to switch places. Williams took a shaky breath. When I stepped back from the window, I saw my own reflection in the glass, except the glass is one way. Patients can't see through it, and observers shouldn't see their own reflection. But there I was, clear as anything, staring back at myself. And then I was in the room, looking out through the observation window at the empty corridor. The door was locked from outside. My radio didn't work. I was there for 3 hours before day shift found me. I looked at the observation window, at the one-way glass that supposedly prevented reflections. My face stared back at me, clear and sharp in the dim light. Not a reflection. A person standing in the corridor, looking through the window, looking exactly like me. The figure in the corridor wore my face, but stood with Morrison's unnaturally still posture. Arms at sides, head tilted slightly, watching me with that same focused intensity Morrison had displayed. I pressed against the wall farthest from the window. Williams, I can see someone in the corridor, someone who looks like me. That's what happens when you watch too long, Williams said softly. The observation creates a copy. Something that knows your schedule, your patterns, your documentation protocols. Something that can take your place in the routine while you're stuck in the room. That's not possible. I'm home, Dr. Chen. I left the hospital 2 weeks ago, but according to the staff schedule, Williams, RN, has been working every night shift since then. Someone is completing my rounds, signing my name to observation logs, maintaining my documentation. My radio crackled. Someone who knows exactly how I work, Williams continued, because she spent 6 weeks watching me through that window, learning my patterns, measuring the intervals between observations. Morrison, or whatever she really is. The logs say she was found in an observation tower of an abandoned psychiatric facility, but no one verified which facility. No one checked how long she'd been there. No one asked what she was watching for all those years. I thought about Morrison's intake notes, the sparse documentation, the absence of personal history. What was she watching? Other observers, Williams said. People who came to watch her, maintenance workers, urban explorers, police during wellness checks. She watched them watching her until she understood their patterns well enough to take their places. The figure in the corridor hadn't moved, still standing at the observation window, wearing my face, studying me with patient attention. The abandoned facility was called Riverside Observation Center, Williams continued. It closed in 1987. Morrison's admission papers say she was found there in January, but Riverside was demolished in 1992. It hasn't existed for 30 years. Then where was she found? Nowhere. She wasn't found because she was never lost. She's been moving between observation wings for decades, taking the places of staff who watched too long, learning schedules, copying patterns, replacing observers with perfect replicas who maintain the routines while the original staff are locked in the rooms. I watched my duplicate in the corridor. She raised one hand and pressed it against the observation window. The gesture was slow, deliberate, a mirror of what Morrison had done during my extended observation. How many of us are there? I asked. How many observers has she replaced? I don't know, but I checked employment records for psychiatric facilities in the region. Dozens of observation wing staff have gone on sudden medical leave over the past 15 years. Most never came back. A few returned briefly, then left healthcare entirely. Did you talk to any of them? One, a nurse named Patricia Gomez who worked at Clearwater State Hospital until 2018. She wouldn't say much, but she told me one thing. Don't work consecutive night shifts in the observation wing. The schedule is how she learns you. The routine is how she becomes you. My duplicate in the corridor moved away from the window. She walked with my gait, my professional stride, the exact way I moved during rounds, heading toward the nurses' station, where the observation logs were kept, where the schedule showed exactly when each patient required monitoring. Williams, the copy is going to continue my rounds. She's going to document observations in my handwriting. I know. That's what mine did. Perfect documentation, appropriate clinical judgments. No one questioned the routine. The copy understands observation protocols better than we do because she learned them by being observed. How do I get out? You don't. Not until 7 a.m. when day shift arrives and finds you. And even then, administration will assume you had some kind of breakdown, locked yourself in the room during a stress episode. They'll put you on medical leave just like they did with me. And the copy? The copy will keep working your shifts. She'll maintain your schedule, sign your name, complete your documentation. Eventually, she'll find another observer who watches too long, and she'll move on to the next facility. I sank onto the bed, my back against the wall, watching the empty corridor through the observation window. Williams, are you really on medical leave? Are you really at home? The radio was quiet for a long moment. I'm somewhere, Williams finally said. I'm not sure if it's home, The apartment looks right, feels right, but sometimes I see observation windows where they shouldn't be. Sometimes I hear intercom static in the middle of the night. Sometimes I wake up and I'm standing in front of my bathroom mirror, but the reflection is wearing hospital scrubs and holding a clipboard. You think you're still in the observation wing? I think the observation wing expands, connects to other places through the watching. Once you've been observed long enough, you're always in the room, always on the wrong side of the glass. The physical location doesn't matter anymore. The corridor remained empty. My duplicate had moved beyond visual range, continuing rounds according to my established schedule. In 15 minutes, she would return to check room 8. She would look through the observation window and see me sitting on the bed. And she would document my behavior with professional detachment, noting my position, my apparent mental state, my compliance with the invisible protocols of being observed. What do I do when she comes back? I asked. Nothing, Williams said. You sit still. You maintain appropriate affect. You demonstrate the kind of calm acceptance that observation requires. Because if you resist, if you show agitation or distress, she'll document it as psychiatric deterioration. And then? And then she'll recommend extended observation, longer intervals, more detailed documentation, the kind of monitoring that never ends. I looked at the observation window, at the one-way glass that now reflected my face back at me, even when no one stood in the corridor. How long have you been in your room, Williams? The radio crackled softly. I'm not sure anymore. The calendar says 2 weeks, but it feels longer. Time moves differently when you're always being watched. Are you really talking to me? Is this conversation real? Silence. Then, I don't know, Dr. Chen, but someone needed to explain. Someone had to tell you what happens in the observation wing when you watch too long. Whether that someone is really me or just another copy, another replacement, another observer who learned the patterns. The transmission ended. I was alone in room 8, sitting on the bed, waiting for my duplicate to return and document my behavior according to the schedule I'd established during 3 nights of careful observation. 15-minute intervals for rooms 1 through 7. Hourly checks for room 8. The room where observers went when they watched too long. The room that was always occupied, even when the census said it was vacant. The room where I would sit and wait, maintaining appropriate affect, demonstrating calm acceptance, being the perfect patient for someone who wore my face and knew my schedule better than I did. Because someone has to be observed. Someone has to be in room 8. And the observation wing always needs one more patient than the census officially records. Morning brings relief in hospitals. Day shift arrives, night shift leaves, and the long darkness ends. But in the observation wing, sunrise changes nothing. Because the watchers never really leave, and some shifts last far longer than 12 hours. At 5:30 a.m., my duplicate returned. I heard the footsteps first, the exact rhythm of my own walk, the slight drag of my right foot that came from an old running injury, the sound I'd never consciously noticed until I heard someone else making it. She stopped at the observation window. I stayed on the bed, back against the wall, hands folded in my lap, the same position Morrison had maintained during her first weeks of observation. Calm, still, appropriate affect. My duplicate raised her clipboard and made a notation. I couldn't see what she was writing, but I knew the format: time, location, patient behavior, clinical observations, standard documentation. After 30 seconds, she moved away, continuing rounds to the other rooms. Professional, efficient, following the schedule I'd established. I checked my phone. Still no signal, but the time display worked. 5:31 a.m. 90 minutes until day shift arrived at 7 a.m. 90 minutes until someone found me locked in room 8 and asked questions I couldn't answer without sounding delusional. I thought about Williams's words. Administration will assume you had some kind of breakdown, They would document stress-related confusion, recommend psychiatric evaluation, place me on mandatory medical leave while they investigated how a staff member ended up locked in a patient room. And my duplicate would continue working my shifts, signing my name, maintaining the observation schedule with flawless precision. No one would notice the replacement, because the copy understood observation protocols better than I did. At 6 a.m., the corridor lights brightened to simulate dawn, automatic system designed to help patients maintain circadian rhythms. The observation wing's one concession to natural cycles. I heard movement from the other rooms, patients waking, beginning their morning routines within the constraints of isolated observation. Patterson's muttering from room 1, Rodriguez's quiet weeping from room 3, Chen's confused calling from room 4, Thompson's rapid monologue from room 5, Davis's responses to internal voices from room 6, Anderson's silence from room 7, and room 2, the room that had been empty during my first shift. The room where Morrison said Williams was now learning what it meant to be observed instead of observing. I pressed my face against the observation window, trying to see down the corridor toward room 2. The angle was wrong. Each observation window faced only into its own room, with limited visibility of the hallway beyond. But I could hear something from that direction, a voice calling out, "Hello? Can someone hear me? I'm locked in. The door won't open from inside." The voice sounded familiar. It sounded like Williams, not the Williams I'd spoken with on the radio. This voice was younger, more present, less distant. The Williams who'd given me orientation 3 nights ago. The Williams who'd told me to limit observation intervals in room 8. "Williams?" I called out. "Is that you?" "Dr. Chen, where are you?" "Room 8. I'm locked in." "Room 8? Williams sounded confused. "But that room should be vacant. Morrison was discharged yesterday." "When did Morrison discharge?" "March 23rd, Wednesday morning. I processed the paperwork myself before my shift ended." March 23rd was yesterday. Except Williams had told me on the radio that today was March 24th. Except my phone said it was still March 22nd. "Williams, what day is today?" "Thursday, March 24th. Why are you asking?" Her voice cut off abruptly, then quieter. "Wait, that's not right. I came in for Tuesday night shift. March 22nd. It should still be Tuesday." "You work Tuesday night?" "Yes. I was supposed to be off Wednesday, but I'm still here. I've been here all night, but it's been the same night. The same shift that won't end." I gripped the window frame. "Williams, have you left room 2 since Tuesday?" "I was doing rounds. I checked on Morrison in room 8, watched for too long, and then..." She paused. "Then I was in room 2, door locked, radio not working. But I could hear the corridor. I could hear other staff doing rounds. I thought someone would come get me, but no one did. Because the person doing rounds wasn't really staff," I said. "It was Morrison, wearing your face, completing your schedule." "That's impossible." "Is it? You've been locked in room 2 since Tuesday night, but someone has been working your shifts. Someone who knows your documentation style, your observation patterns, your exact routines." Williams was quiet. Then, "Dr. Chen, if what you're saying is true, then who gave you orientation 3 days ago?" I remembered the nurse who'd walked me through the observation wing protocols, who'd shown me the logs, who'd warned me about room 8. The nurse I'd assumed was Williams based on her name tag and her comprehensive knowledge of the facility. "She knew everything about the observation protocols," I said slowly. "Every detail about patient behaviors, documentation requirements, observation intervals. She knew the history of room 8 better than anyone should. Because she'd been watching from inside it," Williams finished. "Watching us work, learning our patterns through the observation window. Morrison spent 6 weeks studying how we documented, how we moved, how we thought. And when she'd learned enough, she switched places, started working the shifts while the real staff were locked in the rooms. But there are only 8 rooms, Williams said. If she's been doing this for years, moving between facilities, replacing observers, where are all the others? I thought about the abandoned Riverside Observation Center, the facility that had been demolished 30 years ago, but somehow still appeared in Morrison's intake paperwork. What if the observation wing connects to other places? I asked. What if the rooms aren't just in this hospital? What do you mean? The one-way glass, it's supposed to allow observation in only one direction. But what if it's actually a threshold, a boundary between the place where observers stand and the place where the observed exist? That doesn't make sense. Neither does a patient who can learn someone's entire professional identity by being watched. Neither does losing days during a single shift. Neither does finding yourself locked in a room that should have been empty. Williams didn't respond. I continued. Morrison wasn't found in an abandoned facility. She was found in an observation room that exists independently of any specific building. A room that connects to every observation wing in every psychiatric hospital. And when she replaces an observer, when she takes someone's place in the schedule, the original person goes into that room. Room 8. Sometimes room 8, sometimes room 2. Whichever room is officially vacant on the census, whichever space needs filling to maintain the count. But I'm in room 2 of Northbrook Psychiatric Hospital. This is a real place. Are you sure? Look out your observation window. Tell me what you see in the corridor. Silence for several seconds. Then Williams's voice shaking. I see multiple corridors, overlapping, different hospitals, different layouts, but all containing observation rooms. And in each corridor, there's someone doing rounds, someone who looks like staff but moves like Morrison. How many corridors? Dozens, maybe more. They're all visible at once like transparency sheets stacked together. And in the rooms along each corridor, I can see people, observers who are now observed, staff members who watched too long and lost their places in the real world. I looked out my own window. The corridor had changed. Multiple hallways occupied the same space, each one showing a different observation wing. Different hospitals, different eras, different architectural styles, but all designed around the same principle. Rooms for watching, windows for observing, glass barriers between the watchers and the watched. And in each corridor, a figure moved through rounds. Some wore modern scrubs, others vintage nursing uniforms, a few in street clothes. But all moved with that same purposeful gait, that same measured attention to schedule and documentation. All of them Morrison, or copies of Morrison, or something that wore the faces of observers who'd watched too long and learned too much about the boundaries between observation and existence. At 6:45 a.m., I heard voices approaching from the main hospital. Day shift arriving early, normal procedure during transition periods. I recognized Charge Nurse Martinez's voice, discussing patient assignments with the incoming staff. Room 8 should be vacant, Martinez was saying. Morrison discharged Wednesday morning. We're expecting a new admission this afternoon. They were walking down the corridor toward the observation wing. My duplicate would be at the nurse's station, completing end-of-shift documentation, ready to provide handover report to the incoming staff, ready to explain that she'd completed a routine night shift with no unusual incidents. Martinez, I called out, pressing against the observation window. I'm locked in room 8. I need help. My voice didn't carry through the one-way glass. The observation rooms were designed to prevent sound from escaping. Patients could be heard through intercom systems, but direct shouting wouldn't penetrate the barriers. I tried my radio again. This is Dr. Chen in room 8. I need immediate assistance. Static. Then my duplicate's voice. Observation wing all clear. Night shift completing handover documentation. She was using my radio, broadcasting on my frequency. maintaining the illusion of normalcy. Martinez and the day shift staff entered the observation wing corridor. Through the window, I saw them gather at the nurse's station, where my duplicate stood with perfect professional posture, clipboard in hand, ready to provide report. "Quiet night," my duplicate was saying. "Standard observations. All patients stable. Documentation complete." Martinez reviewed the logs, nodding approval. "Good work, Dr. Chen. You can head home." My duplicate smiled, my exact smile, the professional expression I used to acknowledge compliments. "Thank you. I'll see you tonight." Tonight. She was planning to return for the next night shift, my next scheduled shift. She would continue the pattern indefinitely, working my schedule, signing my name, being me in all the ways that mattered to administration and protocol. And I would remain in room 8, observed at hourly intervals, documented with appropriate clinical detail, a patient in a room that officially didn't contain anyone. The day shift staff dispersed to begin morning routines, medication distribution, breakfast preparation, patient assessments, normal hospital procedures. My duplicate walked past room 8's window, making brief eye contact through the one-way glass. She raised her clipboard slightly, showing me the top page. Observation log, room 8. Patient, Dr. Sarah Chen. Status, under observation for stress-related decompensation. Schedule, hourly monitoring. Duration, indefinite. Then she smiled and continued down the corridor, heading toward the exit, leaving the observation wing, going home to my apartment, living my life with perfect accuracy, because she'd learned everything about me through 60 hours of careful observation across 3 night shifts. I sank back onto the bed. Martinez would discover me eventually, probably during morning census when she verified patient counts against admission records. She would unlock the door, ask questions, document my confused responses as evidence of psychiatric distress, and no one would believe that the person who'd just completed night shift and walked out of the hospital wasn't really Dr. Sarah Chen, because the copy was perfect, because observation creates perfect replication, because I'd watched too long and learned too late that in the observation wing, the boundary between observer and observed isn't just permeable, it's reversible. And once you've crossed to the wrong side of the glass, the schedule continues without you. The rounds proceed on time. The documentation remains flawless. And somewhere in the overlapping corridors that connect every observation wing that ever existed, Morrison continues her eternal rounds, checking on the observers who became the observed, maintaining the careful records of all the staff who watched too long and lost their places in the world beyond the one-way glass. Every hospital keeps records, admission logs, discharge summaries, documentation of who came in and who went home. But some facilities maintain a different kind of archive, a roster of observers who entered the observation wing and never quite left. Their shifts still appear on the schedule. Their handwriting still fills the logs. But the people themselves exist only as entries in a census that no administrator will ever read. If you've ever looked at an old staff photo and recognized someone who shouldn't be there, I want to hear about it. Martinez found me at 7:43 a.m. I heard her footsteps in the corridor, the jangle of her keys, her muttered count as she verified patient census against admission records. 1, 2, 3, 7 patients, 8 rooms, 1 vacant. She paused outside room 8. I stood near the observation window, making myself visible, maintaining appropriate posture, hoping she would see me and understand that something was wrong. Martinez consulted her clipboard, then looked through the observation window. Our eyes met. She frowned, checked her paperwork again, then pulled out her master key and unlocked the door. "Dr. Chen, what are you doing in here?" I was locked in during night shift. The patient, Morrison, Morrison was discharged Wednesday morning. This room has been vacant for 2 days. Martinez stepped inside, examining the space with professional concern. How did you get locked in an empty room? It wasn't empty. Morrison was here. She locked me in after I exceeded the observation interval. Martinez touched my forehead, checking for fever. Classic nursing assessment when someone presented with confused statements. Dr. Chen, you completed your night shift an hour ago. I just reviewed your handover report at the nurses' station. You provided standard documentation, reported no incidents, and left the building. That wasn't me. That was someone who looks like me, but... Sarah. Martinez's voice shifted to the careful tone healthcare workers use with colleagues in distress. You've worked 3 consecutive night shifts. That's against hospital policy for observation wing assignments. The stress and sleep deprivation can cause confusion, even hallucinations. She guided me gently toward the door. I'm going to call Dr. Williams to come evaluate you. We need to make sure you're okay before you drive home. Williams is locked in room 2. She's been there since Tuesday. Martinez stopped, her hand on my arm. Williams has been on medical leave for 2 weeks. She's not in the hospital. Can you check room 2, please? Martinez hesitated, then led me down the corridor to room 2. She looked through the observation window. Empty, just like room 8. Both rooms are vacant, Sarah. I looked through the window. The room was empty. Bed made with hospital corners, no personal belongings, no sign of occupancy, but I could hear William's voice faint through the intercom static. Dr. Chen, can you still hear me? I'm here. I'm in room 2. Why can't anyone see me? Do you hear that? I asked Martinez. She listened, head tilted. Hear what? The voice. Williams calling from inside the room. Martinez pulled out her radio. This is Martinez. I need Dr. Patterson to come to the observation wing immediately. Staff wellness evaluation required. Within minutes, Dr. Patterson arrived. Hospital psychiatrist. Colleague I'd worked with for 3 years. Someone I trusted professionally. He conducted a brief assessment right there in the corridor. Standard questions about sleep, stress, orientation to time and place. I answered carefully, knowing how my responses would sound. Yes, I'd worked 3 consecutive nights. Yes, I was exhausted. Yes, I understood how sleep deprivation could cause perceptual disturbances. But I also described Morrison's progressive movement during extended observation. The logs documenting similar incidents with previous staff. The duplicate who'd completed my shift and walked out of the hospital. Patterson listened with professional attention, occasionally making notes. Sarah, I'm going to recommend a mandatory week off. Rest, proper sleep schedule, and a follow-up evaluation before you return to night shift duties. And if I refuse? Then I'll have to document this as a psychiatric emergency and require immediate evaluation. I understood the choice. Voluntary medical leave or involuntary psychiatric hold. Either way, I wouldn't be working in the observation wing, and my duplicate would continue the shifts undisturbed. I'll take the week, I said. Patterson nodded, relieved. Good. Martinez will drive you home. Don't operate a vehicle when you're this tired. Martinez drove me to the address on my staff file. My apartment building looked correct. Right neighborhood, familiar exterior. The crack in the front steps that maintenance kept promising to fix. But when we reached my door, I heard sounds from inside. Movement, running water, someone humming quietly. Do you have a roommate? Martinez asked. No, I live alone. She tried the doorknob, locked. I fumbled for my keys, but Martinez stopped me. Sarah, if someone's inside, we should call security. It's my apartment. I have a right to enter. I unlocked the door. The apartment was exactly as I'd left it 3 days ago. Coffee cup in the sink, laptop on the table, laundry basket by the bedroom door. But someone was in the shower. Martinez followed me inside, hand on her radio, ready to call for help. The shower turned off. A moment later, my duplicate emerged from the bathroom, wrapped in my towel, hair wet. She saw us and smiled. My smile, perfect replication. "Martinez? What are you doing here?" Martinez looked between us, her face pale. Two Dr. Sarah Chens, identical in every detail except our clothing. "Who are you?" Martinez whispered. My duplicate's smile didn't waver. "I'm Dr. Chen. I just got home from night shift. Why are you in my apartment?" She looked at me with polite confusion. "I'm sorry. Do I know you? You look familiar." Martinez backed toward the door, radio in hand. "I'm calling security. Both of you stay here." My duplicate moved faster. She crossed the room with Morrison's purposeful stride, took the radio from Martinez's hand with gentle firmness. "That won't be necessary. I can explain everything." She turned to me. "You're having a stress reaction, sleep deprivation, overwork, the kind of breakdown that makes healthcare workers see doubles of themselves. It's more common than you think in high-stress environments." She spoke with my voice, my professional calm, my clinical vocabulary. "Martinez, please take her back to the hospital. She needs proper psychiatric evaluation, probably a short admission to ensure her safety." Martinez looked at both of us, trying to determine which version was real. My duplicate had just finished a shower, had keys to the apartment, knew personal details about the space. I was exhausted, confused, claiming impossible things about patients who weren't in the system and duplicates who stole identities. From Martinez's perspective, the choice was obvious. "Sarah," Martinez said, addressing my duplicate, "can you come back to the hospital with us, just to help us sort this out?" "Of course. Let me get dressed." My duplicate walked into the bedroom, moving through my apartment with perfect familiarity. Because she'd learned everything about me. Not just work patterns and documentation style, but personal habits, morning routines, the exact way I organized my space. 60 hours of observation had been enough. Martinez touched my arm gently. "Sarah, whoever you are, we're going to help you, but you need to come back to the hospital voluntarily." "I'm Dr. Chen. I work in the observation wing. I've worked there for 3 years." "Can you prove that?" I reached for my wallet, but it wasn't in my pocket. My ID badge, keys, credit cards, everything that documented my identity was back at the hospital, in the locker where I'd stored personal belongings before starting my shift. The shift that had never officially ended because my duplicate had completed it for me. My duplicate returned, dressed in my clothes, carrying my work bag. She pulled out an ID badge, her photo, my name, hospital credentials. "Martinez, let me handle this. I'll bring whoever this is back to the hospital. We'll do a proper evaluation, ensure she gets appropriate care." Martinez looked relieved to have a clear authority figure taking charge. "Okay, I'll meet you there. Dr. Patterson should be ready to conduct a formal assessment by the time you arrive." She left, casting one more uncertain glance at both of us. My duplicate closed the door, then turned to me. "You can stay here," she said quietly. "The apartment, the life, the identity. I don't need the physical space. I only needed the schedule, the routine, the professional role." "Why?" "Because observation requires continuity. The rounds must be completed. The documentation must be maintained. Patients need monitoring regardless of staff wellness or personal circumstances." She picked up my laptop, opened a file. Personnel records for Northbrook Psychiatric Hospital dating back 15 years. Dozens of names highlighted in red. "These are the observers who watched too long," she said. "Staff members who exceeded recommended observation intervals and triggered the replacement protocol. Some are still in the observation rooms, living in the spaces between official census counts. Others adjusted, found new lives outside healthcare, accepted that someone else was maintaining their schedules. And the ones who didn't adjust? They're still trying to prove who they are, still insisting that the copies aren't real, still fighting against documentation that clearly shows they stopped working years ago. She pulled up another file. Psychiatric admission records. I recognized some names from the observation wing personnel list. All admitted for stress-related decompensation, all diagnosed with identity confusion, dissociative episodes, delusional thinking about being replaced by duplicates. All eventually discharged to outpatient care, where they presumably learned to accept their new circumstances. You have a choice, my duplicate said. Accept the situation and build a different life, or fight it and end up documented as psychiatrically impaired, unable to work in healthcare, identity permanently questioned. What did Williams choose? Williams is still in room 2. She's been there for 2 weeks, but in that time, multiple versions of Williams have completed her scheduled shifts. The copies maintain her professional obligations, while the original Williams learns what it means to exist in observation rather than practice it. How many copies are there? As many as needed to maintain the schedules. Every hospital with an observation wing requires staff who understand that watching creates connection, that monitoring generates relationship, that observation is a form of care that binds the observer to the observed. She closed the laptop. I'll be working your shifts at Northbrook, but there are other hospitals, other observation wings, other positions that need filling. You could work somewhere else, start fresh, avoid the pattern that triggered replacement. Or you could return to the observation wing, accept placement in one of the rooms, join the others who exist in the spaces between census counts, where observation creates permanent residence. She moved toward the door. I'm taking the car. You can stay here or leave. The apartment lease is paid through next month. After that, you'll need to figure out housing, employment, identity documentation. Building a life from nothing is difficult, but possible. People will ask questions. Martinez saw both of us. Martinez will document a stress-induced episode involving perceptual disturbances. Dr. Patterson will confirm psychiatric decompensation requiring immediate leave. Hospital administration will accept that Dr. Chen needs extended rest, which I'll take once the mandatory week is over. She opened the door. In 7 days, I'll return to work as you. The schedule will continue. The observations will be documented, and no one will remember that there was ever any confusion about who Dr. Sarah Chen really is. She left, closing the door quietly. I sat in my apartment, my space, my life, now occupied by someone who knew every detail about me because she'd watched long enough to become me. Through the window, I could see the hospital in the distance. The observation wing was on the north side, 8 rooms arranged in perfect symmetry. And in those rooms, observers sat and waited, existing in the margins of census records, maintaining appropriate affect, demonstrating calm acceptance of the schedule that never ended. Some shifts last longer than 12 hours. Some observation periods extend beyond employment. And some hospitals keep records that document not just who came in and who went home, but who crossed the threshold between watching and being watched, and never quite returned to the side of the glass where they started. I have a week to decide. Stay in this apartment and build a new life as someone without documented identity, or return to the observation wing and accept permanent placement in one of the rooms where observers go when they watch too long. Either way, my shift at Northbrook Psychiatric Hospital is over. The schedule continues without me, and somewhere in the observation wing, my duplicate is completing rounds with perfect precision, documenting patient behaviors with appropriate clinical detail, maintaining the careful attention that observation requires. Because someone has to watch. Someone has to keep the records, and the observation wing always needs staff who understand that watching creates more than documentation. It creates replacement. It creates continuity. It creates the permanent record of everyone who ever looked through one-way glass and discovered too late that observation works both ways, and some things watch back with perfect accuracy, learning patterns and rhythms and identities until the boundary between observer and observed dissolves completely, leaving only the schedule, the rounds, the endless documentation of nights that never quite end and shifts that continue long after the original staff have been locked in rooms that officially don't exist on any census that matters to the world beyond the observation wing's one-way glass.